Okay, so we get fresh water from surface water. Surface water is precipitation that does not infiltrate the ground or return to the atmosphere by evaporation or transpiration. So the surface runoff, by the way, your surface water is going to be your lakes and your rivers and your streams and your little mini wetlands, and that's going to be basically the water that you see. And the runoff is water flowing off the land onto these bodies of surface water. And now a watershed or drainage basin is the land area that delivers water, sediment, and dissolved substances via small streams to a major stream or major river. The major watershed in the United States is the Mississippi River Basin. That's the largest. Okay, so reliable runoff is surface runoff of water that generally can be counted on as a stable source of water from year to year. So this is what the municipalities can pretty much count on when they are allocating the amount of water they should have available for their constituents. I thought it was kind of cool. I want to show you an example of the Chattahoochee watershed because this is, the river that was dammed up for us to create Lake Lanier right up here. So all these areas that you see are basically especially where there we are, the Chattahoochee River right here, it's that kind of like a medium green color. All that land is going to drain its water. Whenever there's rainfall, it'll drain into the Chattahoochee River. Now, you also will have like little minor basins, like for streams that can all lead into one larger one. But this is your basic Georgia, one of the major watersheds. Also, I think it's kind of cool because it also gives you some perspective. I talked earlier about how we have been in litigation with Alabama and Florida over our damming of Lake Lanier way up here, because what happens when you dam rivers is that you decrease the flow of the river all the way down for everyone else to use. So I guess it's basically a thought of got to critically think is who owns it? Who owns that water downstream? Is it pretty much a free-for-all for us to do whatever we want with, or at some point do we have to have some repercussions on who's going to take what? Okay, we use a large and growing portion of the world's reliable runoff. So in the last century, human population tripled and water withdrawal increased sevenfold. We showed you at the beginning of the school year the exponential growth curve, and we showed you also how human populations basically end up settling near water. Because obviously water is pretty important, guys. Water, we're made up of 60% water, right? Mostly found in your cells. So water is extremely important, and we're using it up. More water used by the rich. Takes 2,400 bathtubs to make a small car, 37 gallons to produce 1 cup of coffee, and 25 bathtubs to make 1 t-shirt. There are some interesting statistics we can find on water in the book called The Story of Stuff, The Secret Life of Everyday Things. We'll probably have y'all read that over the holiday break. Okay, trivia. What is the rainiest city in the United States? What do you think? Oh, you think it's Seattle, huh? What else are you thinking? Oh, are you also thinking Seattle? Okay, let's see. For the last 30 years, the rainiest 3 in order are Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida, and Nolens. So no, it is not Seattle. That is always the first. Okay, from this slide, you can see that the average annual precipitation in the United States, the very blue areas have quite a bit of rainfall compared to the yellow. Pretty much it should be evident to you that when you look at the East Coast, it should stand out that we have a lot more water than they do out west for the most part. Now, if you see the very west coast, they're going to have the impact of having an ocean breeze come from, they have the water being picked up from the ocean. And then they'll have like the rain shadow effect where you have your windward side should be more wet than your leeward side. So it's going to be on the other side of your Sierra Nevada mountain ranges, should be more arid. On the other side of your Rocky Mountains, it should be more arid. But for sure, we have more water on the East Coast and on the West Coast. In the East, we use that water for energy quite a bit, so we've dammed up majority of the rivers that even are possible to get hydroelectric power from. So the problem that we have with water in the eastern part of the United States is mostly that we pollute the water because we use it for also coolants for factories, and because of the paving that we do for a lot of the major cities, you have a lot of flooding. So there's obviously a lot of water, so if you can't, that water can't go back down to the ground and infiltrate and percolate down to the ground water, then there's much more potential for flooding. Also, though, they have some shortages because of the pollution, but sometimes because of drought. The drought, is a prolonged period in which precipitation is 70% lower and evaporation is higher than normal, because if it's not normally dry there and you have more, solar intensity, then you'll have more evaporation going on. Now, the arid and semi-arid areas out west, most of the water usage is actually from irrigation. About 85% of it is, and then a lot of that's unnecessarily wasted. So they have actually, their biggest problem is a shortage of runoff caused by low rain and low rainfall, and they have high evaporation rates, especially during drought, and they have recurring severe droughts all the time. So most of the water in the U.S. comes from groundwater. Here's some more shortages in water deficit regions in the United States. Let's see, freshwater resource in the United States. Oh, I already said this. So water is used for energy and manufacturing. Water problems are flooding, urban shortages, and occasional droughts. In west, it's irrigation. Water problems are shortage because of low precipitation, evaporation, and recurring drought. And then and this is from 2007, we had some hot spots. This is where they think that competition for scarce water could trigger political and legal conflicts within the next 20 years. So these are the major hotspots. They're out west. And in particular, you're going to see over here in Nevada, that's actually where Lake Mead is located. And a lot of areas are pulling from Lake Mead for, especially Southern California. They are pulling from Lake Mead to irrigate very arid land where we've decided to have, where we've decided to grow a lot of crops in a desert. But there's your water hotspots. Okay. Oh, I want to show you this picture. The U.S. Drought Monitor in Georgia. I just pulled this picture off the internet today. Today is, so it's not, this is from, they do this every Thursday, by the way. So I'm actually recording this on Monday, September 1st, 2014. But every Thursday, they do a water analysis. This is, the United States does this. And so if you look at Gwinnett County over here, where's my monitor? There it is. If you look at Gwinnett County, we're actually not in a drought right now, but where is the primary agriculture in United States? In Georgia. Yeah, down south. So they are experiencing some drought, and so they obviously are going to have some issues with, we have problems with our peanut crops, and we have some issues with any citrus crops we have down there, and peaches, and we have pecans. We have a lot of pecans that they grow down there, but what happens, obviously, if it's too arid and dry, they kind of shrivel up, and it's hard for them to make it if they don't irrigate more. What is this? Natural capital degradation and stress on the world's major river basins. Okay, so the rivers are, they get stressed out. In other words, what ends up happening here is that you have, let me go back here, my bad. Normally what happens is you have a lot of dams that are created, and when you have too much damming, you end up putting extra stress on the rivers, and the basins themselves are not acquiring as much water as normal. Look at us right here. We're fine. Our river basins are collecting water just fine. Mississippi River Basin dumps right about here. The Mississippi River does. So we're doing pretty good. But the areas that are high stress are going to be in red. And yes, we have a lot of farming here, and we have a lot of farming here. Okay, so long-term severe droughts increasing because of extended periods of below normal rainfall and diminished groundwater. Harmful environmental effects: dries out soils and reduces stream flows, decreases tree growth and biomass, lowers NPP. NPP is net primary productivity. So in other words, that is the amount of carbohydrate that a plant produces minus the amount of carbohydrate the plant then uses up for its own photosynthesis. So when I say NPP, you say photosynthesis. Let's try it. NPP, photosynthesis. Good job, guys. Good job, gang. Lowers NPP and crop yields and shifts biomes. We have desertification. Desertification is basically where you have arid regions kind of close to a desert. It extends the desert further. So drought will increase. A lot of times we over irrigate, so we cause desertification on our own accord. Okay, dams. The main goals of a dam and reservoir system are to capture and store runoff. Runoff is released to control floods. Dams are also used for electricity, supplying irrigation water, and recreation. So a good example of a dam would be Lake Lanier. So they dammed up the Chattahoochee River. They were able to they then put hydroelectric plant right there on the dam in Lake Lanier. You can use that water now for irrigation. A lot of people have boats and jet skis. It's a Labor Day weekend right now. There's a lot of boats right now having a good time on Lake Lanier, so it's used for recreation. But there are advantages and disadvantages of large dams and reservoirs. The left-hand side, you'll see the positives, and on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the negatives. So positives, you will see that you can obviously get some water from it to irrigate. Provides drinking water. Yeah, that's why we're in litigation with Florida and Alabama, though, is because we have permission to create hydroelectric plant, but we do not have permission to use it for water to drink. Reservoirs useful for recreation and fishing, can produce cheap electricity once it's built, and then reduces downstream flooding. You can control how much is let out, and so that it helps with the flooding of the banks. Unless the dam cracks and breaks and splits, and then you have some severe flooding that is going to happen. And there are some concerns for those of you who read your case studies that I asked you to read with China and the Three Gorges Dam, how they have 25 cracks on that dam and how it's built on a seismic fault. But anyway, so if you don't have that happen, then the chances of the flooding are decreased. But in order to create this dam, you are going to have to flood this whole basin, this whole reservoir area, and usually that's pretty fertile cropland because it's when you're on a floodplain, you have a lot of the silt and sediment and nutrients that come from the water, going up the bank and flooding. So people lose their land, large losses of water through evaporation. A lot of times too, when you dam up a river like this, it will increase methane because you're going to have a lot of plants that are under here that are end up decomposing. And then when the water level decreases, that methane is then released later. Now that you have all this water as surface water, it's just sitting there, getting warmer and warmer. So you're going to have large losses of water through evaporation, deprives downstream cropland and estuaries of nutrient-rich silt. So what happens is that right behind, there's still some flow from the upper Chattahoochee coming down here, if you think about it as Lake Lanier. I like to visualize this as Lake Lanier. But anyway, you have a lot of sediment that will build up behind the dam, and there has to be some periodic dredging right behind here to make sure that it doesn't build up with all that sediment. So when you dam this up, you are going to now disrupt mitigation and spawning of some fish. You aren't going to have that nutrient-rich silt, make it all the way down. And a lot of times what happens, y'all, is that the river decreases flow. When that happens downstream, a lot of times the river no longer makes it to the ocean, and a lot of your estuaries, which is basically where you have fresh water meet salt water, dry up. And that's very severe impact on biodiversity, because those are like the rainforest of what is equivalent of the rainforest to biodiversity. That is our temperate forest biodiversity is found a lot in these estuaries and salt marshes. You have a lot of critters that come in from the sea to lay eggs and spawn. So a lot of marine life, a lot of biodiversity there, plants and animals are at estuaries. So it's very important that we don't disrupt the migration and spawning of fish. One of your case studies had to do with the salmon and the Cuyahoga River and the impact it had on the salmon who live part of their land, life on the river, and then they go out to sea and then they come back to finish. Okay, so here we have the Ataturk. I can't say things. Ataturk Dam. It was constructed on the Euphrates River because if you see the picture on the left, that was 1976. That was a rural area of eastern Turkey, and they couldn't grow any crops, so they dammed up the Euphrates River. And now you can see in the southeast corner here how it flourished. They were able to irrigate and produce. It really helped with their food production. Problem is, though, is that even though they produced food there and they were able to get more electricity, now Syria and Iraq are concerned that the water diverted and by other proposed dams on the Euphrates, they're concerned that's going to leave too little water to meet all the country's needs, and there is potential for conflict right there in and of itself. Rivers running dry, I just talked about this, how dams disrupt the hydrologic cycle, and when rivers run dry part of the year, we lose a lot of our wetlands, and a lot of species suffer because of that. And we have Colorado and Rio Grande. Colorado's been dammed up quite a bit along its path. And then we have water transfers. There's conflict between NorCal and SoCal because there's a lot of water up in Northern California, and they think that Southern California is being wasteful, and that when they divert too much of the water, the Sacramento River stays more polluted, and it decreases flow out into the Gulf down there into San Francisco Bay. So the bay is going to remain more polluted too than normal. And then they think it's going to cause even more environmental problems, but SoCal thinks that, well, they're providing so much food that it's worth it. And here's some desalination.